Hello geometers, today we are taking notes on section 8.2, which is use properties of parallelograms. You will need to have your notes out, a pencil, and the property sheet that you were given in class. First, a look at what we are going to be doing today. We're going to use parallelogram properties to calculate angle and side measures. So first thing, parallelogram properties. Parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. So quadrilateral means it has four sides, and then the opposite sides are parallel. Two other important properties: the opposite sides are also congruent, and then the opposite angles are congruent. So let's mark that in our figure. Opposite sides parallel, we use the arrows for that. Okay, so that was the first important property. Opposite sides congruent. Remember that tick marks are for congruent. And opposite angles are congruent. So this is true of every single parallelogram. So it would be a good idea for you to write these properties down and then for you to draw the figure. All these ones in blue need to be added to your property sheet in the appropriate spots. And I will check this in class. So maybe pause the video if I'm moving too fast for you. Okay, example number 1. It says find the values of x and y. So my first question is, how can we tell that this is a parallelogram? Well, we have one pair of opposite sides parallel. The other pair of opposite sides are parallel. So this is a parallelogram. Now I need to think, what do I know about a parallelogram? Well, first I know that the opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so that right away is going to help us find x. We have x add 4. AB is congruent to DC, which is 12. If I subtract 4, I get x equals 8. Also, I know that in a parallelogram, the opposite angles are congruent. So right then and there, I know that y is equal to 65. That was it. Now an example for you to do. Pause the video and please find the values of A and B in the parallelogram below. Okay, hope you had a chance to try this one. So in a parallelogram, we know opposite sides are congruent. So therefore I have 18 is equal to A subtract 10. Add over 10, we get A is equal to 28. We also know that opposite angles are congruent. So I have B add 16 is equal to 103. Subtract 16 and I get B is equal to 87. So hopefully that one went well for you. We have a few more properties to write down. Okay, so you're going to have to add this property to your formula card. In a parallelogram, the consecutive angles are supplementary. So let's draw ourselves a parallelogram. Okay, so we know that opposite sides are congruent. We know that opposite angles are congruent. Okay, now what it means by consecutive angles are angles that are not opposite. So in this case, angle A and angle B, these are supplementary. And remember that supplementary means they add to be 180. B and C are also going to add to 180, C and D are going to add to 180, and A and D are also going to add to 180. So make sure you put this one in your notes and on your property card. Okay, so here's an example for you to try. Before you try though, I'm going to give you a hint. You will notice we have A and B. So we have two variables, we're going to need two equations. You could do this with a system or without a system. My suggestion to you would be to try to find some connection between these two angles and use those two to set up an equation. Pause the video. Try it. Come back when you're finished, please. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you tried this. Now these two are consecutive angles, which means they're going to be supplementary. So I have A add A minus 10 is equal to 180. A add A is 2A. Subtract 10 is 180. If I add 10 to both sides, I get 2A is equal to 190. Dividing by 2, A is equal to 95. Okay, so I'm going to put that in my figure. A is equal to 95. Now, we know that consecutive angles are supplementary. So I have B add A is also equal to 180. But we just found out that A is equal to 95 degrees. So I'm going to substitute 95 in. If I subtract 95, I get B is equal to 85. So I know that one was a little confusing, but hopefully it went well for you, or at least we understand now how to approach the problem. We have a few more examples and a few more properties to write down. First, I have a little break for you. What did the baby tree say to his father? Gee, I'm a tree. Geometry. Get it? Hopefully that made you smile a little bit. Okay, diagonal properties. Again, this needs to go on your property card. There is a column specifically for diagonal properties. So first thing, a diagonal connects non-adjacent vertices. Okay, so if we draw ourselves a parallelogram, I'm going to mark the opposite sides parallel so we know that it's a parallelogram. Okay, now let's mark in the diagonals. It says non-adjacent vertices. A is adjacent to B and D. Therefore, C is a non-adjacent vertex or vertex. So here's one diagonal. Here's the other diagonal. Okay, in a parallelogram, the diagonals bisect each other. So this point here is a midpoint, which means that these two are congruent and these two are congruent. So both diagonals are bisected. Again, you're going to want to add this one to your property sheet. Now from here, we have two examples and then we are finished. Okay, the diagonals of parallelogram LMNO intersect at point P. What are the coordinates of P? Okay, so what we just learned is that this point P bisects both of the diagonals. That makes P a midpoint. P is the midpoint of LN. It's also the midpoint of MO. I'm just going to pick one of the diagonals. In this case, I'm going to use MO. O is the point 0, 0. It's the origin. M is 7, 4. Okay, now I need to calculate the midpoint. Hopefully we remember that the midpoint formula has us add the x's and divide by 2. Add the y's and divide by 2. In this case, my first x is 0, the second one is 7. And then my y is 4, and 0 divided by 2. This ends up being 7/2, 2. So looking at our options, that's option A. Now you may be wondering, would I get the same answer if I used L and N instead? You would. We're going to do it now, just for practice. L is the point 1, 4. N is the point 6, 0. So if I added my x's, I would get 7 over 2. Added my y's, I would get 4 over 2, which is exactly the same as what we ended up with. So it doesn't matter which diagonal you pick, you will still end up with the same midpoint. Okay, last example. It says the measure of one interior angle of a parallelogram is 0.25 times the measure of another angle. Find the measure of each angle. Right now, pause the video, set yourself up a figure. Once you have the figure, you may come back and we will go over the problem together. So we're told we have a parallelogram. We don't know any of the angle measures. I'm going to call that one x. If that's x, then D is also x, because opposite angles are congruent. Now it says one angle is 0.25 times the measure of the other. So if we call B x, I'm going to call A 0.25x. That makes C also 0.25x. Now we're asked to find the measure of each angle. I need to think, what do I know about angles B and C? What do I know about consecutive angles? Well, I know that they're supplementary. So I have x add 0.25x is equal to 180. Adding, I get 1.25x equals 180. Hopefully you have a calculator out. So if I take 180 divided by 1.25, I get 144. So x is equal to 144. Now this does not answer our question. We're not finished. It says find the measure of each angle. That means angle B is 144. If I take 144 and multiply it by 0.25, I get 36. So my angles are 144 degrees and 36 degrees. So hopefully that went well for you. Okay, so today we used parallelogram properties to calculate angle and side measures. We're going to continue that in class. What you need to do before tomorrow is go on to Schoology and take the Day 2 quiz. You can find it under Chapter 8. It's only 2 problems. It's one about parallelograms and then one problem that's review of midpoint distance and slope. So this must be taken by class on Wednesday. Thank you. Good luck.